to Around Kansas. I'm Deb Goodrich.
And I'm Michelle Martin.
And joining us today is the one and only John Brown, the real life persona there behind Michelle, and the somewhat imaginary, scary John Brown behind me, a la John Stewart Curry in the State House. So, John Brown looms large in Kansas. And as our friend Jack Davis, William C. Davis, said many years ago, John Brown is a mountain in the path of history. You simply cannot go around him. You must confront him and the things he did on the plains of Kansas. So that's what Michelle and I have been doing for a long, long time.
Yes, we have. As a matter of fact, we've been doing that at various historic sites throughout Kansas connected to John Brown. And um, myself, as a member of the Lecompton Reenactors for many years, they're the monologue presentations that Howard Duncan researched and wrote had John Brown, but there was really no counter to him until I came along and convinced him that we needed to have Mahala Doyle, one of the widows of the Pottawatomie Creek Massacre in May of 1856. And I've had my fair shares of run ins with John Brown and even slapped John Brown one time. It's been referred to as the slap heard round the world.
It was a Kodak moment. Yeah, it was
Yes, it was.
a lot. A la Alan Sherrill. Uh,
Yes.
it was pretty priceless. It was pretty
So
priceless.
our dear friend Alan Sherrill, who's portrayed John Brown, he really, I think he actually enjoyed being slapped. When we were all done later, and I apologized and said I really did not mean to slap you that hard. He said, "Oh, it's okay. You can do it again." And I said, "I don't think the real John Brown would have taken that from a lady." So
Probably not. Well,
no.
John Brown is a big piece of the Kansas story, and our good friends at the Watkins Museum in downtown Lawrence have an exhibit encountering John Brown that is up through November 6th. And you have to go to the Watkins Museum. It's just wonderful and just strategically located right there on Massachusetts Street in downtown Lawrence, and lots of stuff to see and do. But you get to vote. You go through and you see the exhibit. And according to my another dear friend, Diana Carlin Perrin, who is on the board of directors there, you go through the exhibit and then you vote. Was he a madman or was he a martyr? So the actual viewers of the exhibit will decide. They will consider the question that we've pondered for many, many years.
Yeah.
When the exhibit is done, I guess they'll count the votes and we'll have a decision. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I think we all know where Mahala Doyle and Louisa Wilkinson, another one of the widows of the Pottawatomie Creek Massacre, I think we know where they both would fall. They would definitely
Sure.
fall in the madman camp, especially Louisa Wilkinson, who was ill with the measles that night, the night of Pottawatomie Creek, and uh, Brown and the men came into their cabin and took Alan Wilkinson, her husband, away. She was extremely ill. Mahala Doyle definitely falls in that camp, and she dictated a letter that was given to Brown or sent to him while he was in his cell awaiting trial and execution for his ill-fated raid at Harper's Ferry. She made her sentiments known, and that she wished her son, the one son that Brown and his men spared, that she was very desirous for her son to be there to watch Brown swing from the end of the rope.
Well, he's such a mixed bag. The site that I was associated with for a long time, the Ritchie House, that the Shawnee County Historical Society operates in Topeka, has a whole different take. And Ritchie and John Brown were close friends, um, co-participants in activities on the Underground
Hmm.
Road. And so those slave families that John Brown helped secret out of Missouri and through Kansas and Nebraska and on northward to freedom, they would have a very different opinion. But nobody's in the middle of the road on him. There's one way or the other. There are just um, not many people who were his contemporaries that were on in the middle. They were all
Right.
camps to the left or the right, just like the painting behind me.
Yeah.
They were on the opposite sides as as to what his actions meant and what kind of man he was, and he just keeps getting reinterpreted. Kirk Meacham's John Brown opera was really incredible, and the latest incarnation, the Good Lord Bird. Um, I argued with a historian friend of mine over the weekend about the Good Lord Bird. Actually,
Mhm.
it's a screenwriter friend of mine, Dan Gagliasso, that I ran into in Oklahoma City, a very successful screenwriter, and he just didn't know if he could handle the uh, twisted history of the Good Lord Bird. And I'm like, just go with it. Just go with it and try it. But
Well,
still, he's still generating debate, no matter what he does.
yeah. Well, and the good Lord Bird brings up a point, this idea of a twisted history, but John Brown and the actions and that time period, it was very twisted and very convoluted and very contentious even then. Even among his supporters, especially the Secret Six in Boston, there were those who thoroughly agreed with his very adamant views on abolitionism. They admired his work on the Underground Railroad. They admired his work and his bravery and actually personally leading slaves from freedom out of Missouri into Kansas. They admired that, but they drew a line with violence.
Yeah.
Potawatomi Creek, which he at times in his own life denied that he was a part of, to James Redpath, the correspondent who became very enamored with Brown. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. I had nothing to do with that. And then to other people, he said, yes, he did. And then, of course, Harper's Ferry and some of the individuals in the Secret Six, when he tells them about the Harper's Ferry plan, they say, no, we cannot be associated with this because if you go down for treason, then we go down for treason. And where do you draw a line? And that's where John Brown is fascinating because as a historian and as a human being, while I completely and totally agree with the abolition of slavery, and I know I would have been an abolitionist myself, really, I would have been an abolitionist. I would have fallen in that camp. But where do you draw a line? Do you cross that line into violence? Is violence the answer? And for Brown, it was any means necessary. And that's where some people had to break with him. And that's where even historians say, we can agree with him up to a certain point, but then when he crosses that line into violence, you know, one person's martyr or freedom fighter is another individual's terrorist, depending on what side of the fence you're on. So that's why he's so polarizing still.
Polarizing still. And Abraham Lincoln said exactly what you're saying. He said, "We admire his goals, but we cannot applaud his methods," or something to that
Hmm.
effect, because Lincoln was campaigning in Leavenworth on the day
Hmm.
that uh, Brown was hanged in Charlestown, Virginia. And when asked for a comment, that's what he said. And I don't know if Lincoln was trying to play the political game at that point. It didn't want to go too far
Hmm.
to the left or the right in supporting Brown, but that's probably pretty much what he thought. Um, he,
Yeah.
who knows? Who knows? But it's
Hmm.
we can talk about him forever, and I hope that you go see the exhibit. And another place that I wanted to throw in, our friends just mentioned that the rededication of Topeka's Constitution Hall was held in the past few days. The DAR ladies, and they got some great news from, and it's going to escape my mind now. Oh, I can't remember if it was the Preservation Trust. I don't remember, but our good friends at Constitution Hall in Topeka have just gotten a real boost too. And of course, that is a place that John Brown would have been familiar with, and the
Hmm.
conversation in that building would have concerned him many times. So,
Oh,
um,
you
so
definitely.
so much of bleeding Kansas and, that territorial period that you can still visit all over, um, especially the eastern third of the state. So, Leavenworth, uh, Lecompton, and Lawrence, and
Hmm.
and on down to Fort Scott and places in between. And so, yeah, just all kinds of great places
Definitely.
to learn that story. And give another plug to Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area. So if you visit their site, that's kind of one-stop shopping for a lot of those
Yes.
places on both sides of the border.
And if you are a real history nerd and you want to actually look at documents from the time period, check out the Territorial Kansas online website. Just Google that. You can go in and search and see actual documents from the time period, photographs, documents, other materials connected to the Bleeding Kansas time period. It is a treasure trove.
It's
I was
phenomenal.
living in I was living in Kansas when they were in the process of doing the digitizing, and then got that uploaded. And I remember how amazing it was to be able to sit in my office at Fort Scott Community College, where I was teaching and working, and be able to go to Territorial Kansas online and pop in a search term and then pull up the documents and view them, the originals along with transcriptions, and to be able to have access to those materials immediately was just thrilling. And I think today we've gotten so digital, we forget that we used to have to go to Topeka and actually request those and have things brought out to us. And now we have those at the click of a mouse. So visit that site and look at the historical documents for yourselves.
They're pretty awesome. Really, really are. Great resources. Great resources. So again, visit our friends at the Watkins Museum between now and November 6th, and you can decide for yourself whether he was a martyr or a madman when you encounter John Brown. We'll be right
And
back.
if you're lucky, you'll actually get to encounter John Brown someday
Oh
in the
yeah.
person of our good friend Carrie Altenburn, who portrays John Brown. Take the time, if you go to the Watkins, take the time to go over to the Blackjack Battlefield and Nature Park. Go over there to Baldwin and actually walk in the footsteps of John Brown and his compatriots. Fall is the perfect time to do that. It is absolutely stunning, and you can take in some Santa Fe trail ruts while you're there too.
We got it all. We'll be right back.
In 1821, a trade route was opened from Missouri in the United States across prairies and mountains to Mexico. In 2021, we will mark 200 years of epic conflicts and grand adventures, larger-than-life personalities, and sweeping landscapes. Join us on an historic journey. The Santa Fe Trail lives on.
Find us on social media or santafetrail.org. Welcome to the Western Kansas Wildlife Travel Center, right here in my hometown of Oakley, Kansas. We're the front door of Western Kansas, located on 3 main highways, I-70, US 83, and US 40. And all those roads lead to history, beautiful scenery, and adventure, no matter which direction you go. We now have an IHOP. That brand that you've trusted up and down the road in all your travels is staffed with local folks, real people, just like you and me, and we're waiting on you to join us. So for fun, adventure, fuel up, fuel your body, and let's have some fun.
And I am coming to you from one of my favorite places. This is historic Topeka Cemetery behind me. And this was one of my favorite views too, because I love the juxtaposition of those markers, those wonderful tombstones with the city skyline behind it, because those are the people that created that skyline. And I love that. And I loved taking students when they visited the cemetery, to show them that site and why the lives of these people mattered. So Michelle and I are both pretty big cemetery fans.
And I actually am coming to you from the cemetery at Fort Riley, that is said to be haunted. But it is one of the most beautiful, of course, and tragic places. This particular hillside here has many victims from a cholera epidemic at the post buried here. And so this is one's a little is even sadder than normal, but it is a beautiful place to get in touch with nature and wildlife in the fall in Kansas.
It sure is. And one of the things that I would talk about when I would do tours at Topeka Cemetery, it was a garden cemetery, patterned after Mount Auburn in Boston, which was patterned after Père Lachaise in Paris. And these cemeteries were designed for the visitor to commune with nature. Nature was seen as purifying and as a respite from the craziness of the world. So they were designed as outdoor spaces, to be enjoyed that way. And Topeka Cemetery, gosh, I'm going to forget now how many acres are there, around 100 acres. And you would have deer running through, it wouldn't be that unusual to go up into the middle of the cemetery. And there was a deer family. There was a buck, a doe, and a fawn for a long time that were together there when I lived there. And of course, we had our share of skunks and raccoons and all manner of birds. And you would get these huge blackbirds sometimes, which were really impressive. They would be a foot tall, and these big fat crows, that would be there in the cemetery. And along with the plants and the leaves turning in the fall, it was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. And there's so many cemeteries around the state. There's probably one in your neighborhood that you don't have to go very far to see, that you can wander around and you can enjoy just being outside and walking in a safe place and just breathing some fresh air and maybe learn some history while you're at it.
Deb, when I was growing up in Michigan, when my parents finally built their dream home right down the street from my grandparents, I could walk from my parents' house down past my grandparents and be at the largest cemetery in my hometown. It was not the oldest, but it was the largest. And I could walk down there and visit my grandmother, my dad's mom, who passed away when he was 4. And so I knew her through the stories my grandfather told, but also through her picture. And so I could stop down there and visit her and other family members from my family who had passed, and my step grandma, her family members as well. And I knew their stories. But then as I would walk through the cemetery, one day I noticed a marker for 2 brothers, Albert Chase and his brother, I believe is Carl. And looking at the markers, I remember reading Albert Chase died on the Rapidan in Virginia, and then it gave just a year. And I wasn't sure what that was. And so I went back home, and this was the time before computers, folks. And I had encyclopedias, and I began looking up. I looked up Rapidan, and I started looking and realized this was referring to a Civil War campaign, and that Albert and his brother both had died during the course of the Civil War. They had died just about 2 or 3 months apart from one another. One died on the Rapidan, one was with another unit, a Michigan unit, and died in a prison camp. And so they probably, when one died, he probably thought, oh, my brother will survive and go home to our family. And probably the other sibling died not knowing that the other had passed, and then thought the same thing. And that was my thought. What was the story here? And so
Right.
when I walk through a cemetery, especially in Kansas, because they are filled with so much history. In particular, I like the cemetery at Trading Post, which
Hmm.
is north of Fort Scott, near Lacine, near Mound City, and I like the cemetery in Mound City. Because when you go to the cemetery in Mound City, you've got a monument there to soldiers who died during the Battle of Mine Creek. But you also, when you're there, you have the grave of William A. Stillwell, who was one of the individuals who was killed by Charles Hamilton and his men in the Meridicine Massacre. And as a living historian, I had the opportunity, a bus tour that you led one time. You stopped there at that cemetery and you visited with yours truly is the widow Stillwell at the grave. And we have this amazing newspaper account of the burial of Stillwell. And to be there at that place and to be interpreting that woman and her story and that part of our history in Kansas, it's really a very humbling but eerie experience. And so fall is a fantastic time because our cemeteries in Kansas, so many of them have beautiful old growth trees and those colors change. And the way the leaves sound when you're walking and they crunch underfoot, the sound of the wind rustling through them, the birds, the squirrels, all of the wildlife. It's really just a beautiful experience. And you're right, they become spaces, they become green spaces, they become public spaces. And that idea of them helping purify you, but also you were supposed to feel the presence of the Almighty there, and you were supposed to feel closer. That's where those spirits of your loved ones would be able to come back and commute with you in this place that was hopefully not as sorrowful. And because it was so park like and beautiful. And even though we're out in the West, even outside of our big cities like Kansas City and Topeka and Wichita and Lawrence, the cemeteries do take on that very park like, very serene quality. Even in places like Mound City, Fort Scott with the National Cemetery, they all have just that really beautiful, humbling feel.
They really do. And of course, this time of year, as we're looking into October, a lot of sites are offering talking tombstone tours. So look
Hmm.
into those in your area. I know that a lot of the historic sites are doing that. I know that Fort Hayes does that usually every year.
Hmm.
You'll just have to search those out, but that's a really wonderful way again to get outside on the way, but to be outside while you're doing it and connect
Hmm.
to that place, that uh, great sense of place. And that's just one of the reasons I've always enjoyed them. I was connected like you were with my granny, going to the family cemetery that her mother had started. And I knew those people because she shared about them. And so they
Hmm.
were real to me, and the stories were real. So I didn't look at them as macabre, I guess, as or spooky. They were special. It was a sacred place, but a place you're meant to visit, that you're not meant to avoid, you're
Hmm.
meant to visit, and that's what it's all
Yes.
about. They wanted you to come. And people are going to think I'm awful, but Cyrus Holiday has a flat marker. It's a very plain flat marker, and I am very short. And a lot of times when I had tours, I would I'd take off my shoes, and I would stand on his marker so people could hear me outside. And people, I had some folks on a tour say something about that being rude. And I'm like, I understand and I want you to be respectful of the markers. I said, but I think Cyrus would much rather have our visiting, even if I take my shoes off, than to not have people here and not know anything about him. So me and Cyrus worked it out. We got it all worked out.
Yeah.
I think he was
Well,
okay.
and he was totally fine when I took your portrait right there by his
I know.
tombstone
He
too.
was good. He was good. All good.
He was all good with it. And folks, if you go to Topeka too, sometimes historical events are commemorated, and one that you can't miss in the Topeka Cemetery is the Topeka tornado. The amazing monument to the victims of the Topeka tornado it's just beautiful, and it's impressive, and connects you to that specific event and that specific time in the history of Topeka and Kansas. But definitely, cemeteries are, like you say, they're a beautiful place. You can walk safely, beautiful paths. You get the fresh air, the sunshine. You get that beautiful sense of the change of the seasons, and learn some history while you're out there. I know they're always, it's fascinating to me, not just who is there, but the actual architecture of the tombstones themselves, the
Yeah.
symbolism on
Yeah.
them,
That's so
the
cool.
materials they're made of.
Yeah.
It's always really interesting. And that's coming from someone who, you have to drag me kicking and screaming into a funeral home for a funeral. I'm fine at the cemetery, but I'm not good in the funeral home. It's, once we get once we get to the cemetery portion, I'm fine. That funeral home stage and I don't get along very well. But I'm totally fine going out there to sit and visit with folks.
Well, I've got to tell you, a grave I visited while I was back home. I was, as you all know, when Michelle was running things, I was back home with my sister, and as she was getting better, we would just get out and ride around, just drive around. And one of the places that I wanted to stop because I hadn't been there in a long time was the grave of Ng and Chang Bunker, the Siamese twins,
Mhm.
twins, for whom the name Siamese twins uh, was named for, is it for whom, whatever. So
Mhm.
they are buried just outside of Mount Airy. They stopped performing when their tour ended. I think they were over in Wilkes County nearby, but they married girls from White Plains, Siloam area of Surrey County, North Carolina, and settled there. So when you go to this wonderful little community churchyard, there where the bunkers are buried, there's a pole with a box mounted on it that has tour information. It's got, this is their grave,
Mhm.
and it's got information about them, and there's wonderful little pamphlets that you can take. And I told my sister, that's what I want. When I die, I want pamphlets next to my grave, because you can't get it all on a tombstone, so
No.
I want the booklets there where people can pick those up. Or maybe Bill Bunton and I talked about this many years ago, having QR codes on tombstones where you could appear as a hologram, and tell your
There you
story.
go.
I'd do that. I'd love to do that.
I think that's a great idea. I
I do.
just wish, for some of our folks from the past who we've gone to visit, I wish that there was a QR code. I wish we could bring them back to life somehow and let them visit us and
Isn't
tell
that
us their
true?
story.
That is so true. All right, folks, we'll be right back.
Howdy, I'm Seth Hayes, and welcome to my hometown, from then to now. Council Grove has a rich history as deep as the prairie tallgrass. Spend the day visiting 25 historic sites, or explore the unique shops and restaurants, or mosey out of town along the Santa Fe Trail. You all visit my hometown, Council Grove, in the heart of the Flint Hills.
Okay, looks like it's time for our tour. Welcome to the Fort Wallace Museum. Here at the museum, you're going to find some really interesting stuff like our replica stagecoach from the Butterfield Overland Dispatch. We've got facades from the fort buildings. We've got an 1870s flag. There's a plesiosaur that was discovered locally. We've got the Ray pump organ collection. We're a little bitty place with a great big story, and we'd love to have you.
Coming to you now from the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. This is where I was a couple of weeks ago to honor some amazing individuals. And I think if you're looking at my screen, I'm actually covering up Cowboy Tim. I apologize, Cowboy Tim, who became famous during COVID when he was the only person in the museum. And he was taking care of everything and talking to the exhibits and just online at every time. He has become a social media phenomenon. I'm just going to show you his face real quick right there because he's so cute. And arguably the most famous person who was there. And then right next to me, that is Rex Lynn. And Rex Lynn stars in Young Sheldon. He's the principal in Young Sheldon. Okie, one of the sweetest guys around. And right now, his claim to fame, being eclipsed by all those starring roles, is the fact that he's Reba McEntire's arm candy. So Reba was there to cheer him on this weekend and to honor her mom and rodeo wives. It's really great. And then standing next to Rex is Robert Duvall, the Robert Duvall. And then standing next to him is Barry Corbin, who is, again, one of the sweetest people on the planet. Bruce Boxleitner, another one of the sweetest guys around. And next to him, Patrick Wayne, who is a dear, dear man. And they had a panel discussion, which was very well attended. This is in the lobby area, and folks crowded in to hear them talk about their lives and careers. And it was just incredible, just incredible.
And I'm coming to you from the capital of the Muskogee Nation, Okmulgee. And this is actually the Muskogee Council House. And it served as the seat of the government for the Muskogee Nation in the 19th century. And today it is now a museum that tells the story of the Muskogee people from removal through the Indian Territorial period and up till allotment. But what is fantastic about this site is upstairs they have the chambers where the House of Kings and the House of Warriors met, and they now actually use part of the upstairs as the meeting place for the National Council of the Muskogee Nation. So it serves not only as a museum, but it is still a part of their functioning seat of government. And my husband and I had the opportunity to go ahead and visit. Our one trip during COVID that we've made away out of state was to Oklahoma this summer, and we got to visit and see the completed museum. And that ties in a lot with what you were doing, Deb. You were there at National Cowboy for events at the museum there. And then there was another museum opening while you were in Oklahoma City.
So the First Americans Museum had their grand opening this weekend. And of course, our good friend Jim Pepper Henry is the executive director. And actually, the reception for the honorees of the at the National Cowboy Museum was held on Friday evening at the First Americans Museum. So they got to see firsthand, got a little private party there, which was pretty special. So Oklahoma City, I'm telling you what, was the place to be. So much going on, and two great museums that tell such different stories, but such interconnected stories. And I'm telling you what, people are going to have to really get on the ball to keep up with the things that are going on in Oklahoma City, because it is phenomenal. And of course, so many Kansas connections there. as Michelle knows, and many of you, I've been working on Charles Curtis for a long time, and I'm doing a talk in Oklahoma City just in a few days now, next week, for the Order of the Indian Wars, and it's Charles Curtis, the third senator from Oklahoma, which is what they called him, not always fondly, because he was apparently sticking his nose in their business after they became a state, and they're like, that's okay, we are a state now, we have our own senators, thank you very much. But that's how it goes. But I can't tell you what a wonderful, wonderful weekend it was. And Ken Spurgeon and I were down, and several of the people that are involved in our film project were there. R.W. Hampton, who is going to play General Nelson Miles in our docudrama. And R.W. is the voice of the, he's like the, what do you call it? Like, when you had the voice on all these TV shows, that comes from behind the curtain or whatever, that's R.W. Hampton. He's
your narrator,
voice, the narrator, and he's got this wonderful voice, and he's a singer and just an actor and a cowboy and rancher and just an all around really cool guy. And then Wyatt Mcrae, who is the grandson of Joel Mcrae, and again, just a phenomenal person, and it was so great to visit with Wyatt as always, and all these awesome folks. And George Strait was honored at the awards, and like I said, Reba McEntire's mother and another rodeo wife was honored. And so Reba spoke about those long-suffering rodeo wives and moms who keep everything going while they're competing. And a dear friend of ours, Lewis Craft, was honored. He got a Wrangler Award for his book, Sand Creek and the Tragic End of a Lifeway. And it was pretty phenomenal. And then Michael Grauer received a Wrangler, another dear friend who's actually on staff there, for his book on an artist, Mr. Bugbee, and that is a phenomenal book. And then Andy Hedges got a Wrangler Award for his new album. So it was, I just can't tell you, it was so much fun. It's wonderful to see people honored that deserve to be honored. So that's the great thing. And people who are passionate about the West and telling Western stories, and that's what's so wonderful about it.
And Deb, you're absolutely right when you say that National Cowboy, they tell one side of the Western story, and First Americans Museum tells a completely different. And for our viewers who may not be familiar, the First Americans Museum, oh gosh, this project dates back almost 30 years. Yeah. As a matter of fact, my husband was a professor at Western Michigan University when I sat in his classes as a lowly undergraduate who petitioned to take graduate classes. And he was talking about this museum that he was on a committee that was exploring the viability and the option of creating an American Indian Cultural Center in Oklahoma City, and it would be dedicated to the federally recognized tribes that call Oklahoma their home. And he talked about it at great length with us as graduate students. And then, of course, I went my direction, he went his direction. We kept in touch over the years, and I would ask him periodically, how's the Oklahoma City Museum coming along? And he'd say, oh, we're stalled. Oh, this has happened, that's happened. And for us to be able to go, we were there in July and got a tour with our good friend, James Pepper Henry, and Heather Atone, who is the handled the creation and installation of the exhibits. She's an incredible curator. And my husband was involved in writing a lot of the museum labeling, the panels and the labeling throughout one of the major exhibits. And, unless you understand the museum world, you don't know all the work that goes into it. And this really has been a labor of love that's been picked up by different people over the years, but my husband's been in there since from the beginning. And for him to see it, to actually be able to see it, to touch it, to walk through it, it really was this realization and culmination of a dream. And he said, I remember growing up Indian in Oklahoma, and growing up Indian in Oklahoma wasn't a good thing. When
Mhm.
I was growing up, we were discriminated against. I always wanted an indoor job in the summer. I couldn't figure out why, you know, everybody else got the indoor jobs, but Indian kids, we didn't get indoor jobs, we got outdoor jobs. And he said, my goal in life was just to have an indoor job. And, now he's a professor. But as he walked through the museum, every time he turned around, he kept saying, this is what I imagined. This is what I envisioned. This is what I hoped it would be. And you're right, it connects. This is not just a place where we talk about Native nations in Oklahoma, because so many of the 39 federally recognized tribal nations in Oklahoma were moved from somewhere else to Missouri, to Iowa, to Nebraska, to Kansas, and then to Oklahoma as their last place of removal. So there are these connections that run deep between National Cowboy and First Americans Museum and Kansas. So if you're thinking, oh, the girls are talking about Oklahoma, no. To understand parts of our Kansas history, you've got to go south of the border, and you've got to explore these places in Oklahoma, because you see this continuation of Kansas's history and various forms as it comes across the border. Because history traverses borders, folks. Let's face it.
The First Americans Museum is spectacular. I've had a couple of behind the scenes tours, and Don, Michelle's husband, is actually on video in some of those exhibits too. So it's not just his words, there's actually video of Don in some of those. It is one of the most magnificently designed facilities I've ever been in. It is just spectacular. I cannot say enough about it. We'll be there again next week, so I can't wait to be back. And again, Jim Pepper Henry, who is the director, is also vice chair of the Kaw Nation. So another Kansas connection for you. And we're just so proud and pleased for him. He has done, oh my God, what an unbelievable job. It's just unbelievable what they have accomplished there. And with Jim at the helm, it's really incredible, and something they can sure be proud of.
It is. It's nothing short of phenomenal.
It really is.
And it really is a collaboration between the 39 nations in Oklahoma and the state. And it was not always, it's been a little bit of a rocky relationship at times, but it's worked itself out.
And Oklahoma
And
and Oklahoma City.
and the city of Oklahoma City, yes. And to be honest, I really think the 39 nations and the city of Oklahoma City really deserve that lion's share of the credit for pushing
Yeah.
that boulder, pushing that boulder up the side of the mountain to get us to the top. Because without that support, it would not have happened. And it is spectacular. It's a state-of-the-art facility. It is absolutely beautiful. And everyone involved has done a phenomenal job. And like I said, you'll see those connections to Kansas when you walk in there. And I just have to say, for our viewers, head on south, head on down there, get on that get on the I-35 corridor, head down, or as you're making your way down to Oklahoma City, make a weekend out of it, and stop in our little communities in southeast and south central Kansas. There's some fantastic places to stop and visit. I can think of nothing more fun in the fall than to stop in Sedan and walk along downtown and see the Yellow Brick Road, visit the Hollow, stop at the Red Buffalo gift shop and get some Red Buffalo coffee. Oh my gosh. I was so missing Kansas in the fall. I had to get on Amazon and order my Red Buffalo uh, Dutch apple decaf coffee and my decaf pumpkin spice. And so I'd have my Red Buffalo fall coffee. You've got to stop in and grab some coffee, visit the good folks there, see all of our amazing little towns right along the border. As you head down to Oklahoma, make a day or two out of it. But then look for all of those Kansas history and culture connections when you go visit National Cowboy and First Americans Museum.
Well, I love going down through Caldwell. I avoid
Yes.
states when I can, and so my route a lot of times takes me down through Caldwell, which is one
Mm-hmm.
of our most famous cow towns, and is a beautiful small town. It's just it's really really pretty, and right down there on the Oklahoma border. And I love going through those. I just love those roads. Highway uh,
Mm-hmm.
74, 81. I mean, I just love
Mm-hmm.
those roads down through there that um, parallel the highway, but
Yes.
get off of it a little bit. You can see real farms, real little towns. You're going down Main
Mm-hmm.
Street, these little towns, and when I have time, I really love doing that.
It is. It's fantastic. And like you said, this is a great time of the year as temperatures start to cool down. The days are really nice and comfortable. And as you start to get those changing leaves there, the colors change. And it's really a beautiful, beautiful drive down through that part of Kansas and into that part of Oklahoma. And then you hit the Oklahoma City Metro. And there's so much to see and do, of course, with National Cowboy First Americans, the Oklahoma History Center. But you can also go to the Oklahoma City Bombing Memorial, which is, again, the
It
site of
is
such
the
tragedy.
most well designed.
Oh,
Um, I I really didn't want to go because I'm like, this will be so depressing. It is, of
mhm.
course, a tragic story, but this museum and memorial is so well done. It's mind blowing. It is so
Yeah,
well done.
it
And
is.
I
It's
really think
incredible.
everybody should see it. Noelle took the kids while I was in meetings this weekend. She took the kids to see it, and I've been there, a couple of times. I was
Hmm.
actually there for the 20th anniversary, which was an uh, incredibly moving event. But it is a very powerful exhibit, and I highly encourage you to see that. Again, there's just so much to see and do in Oklahoma City and Guthrie. Oh my gosh, I love Guthrie
Hmm.
at the table with the folks from Guthrie and Guthrie. We were talking about Topeka Cemetery earlier. John Guthrie, for whom
Hmm.
Guthrie, Oklahoma is named, is buried in Topeka Cemetery,
Yes.
and a judge from Topeka. So uh, there's just so many connections. Just take your little notebook and mark off all the ones you
No
can.
kidding. Well, AP McCabe is another example. African American entrepreneur and champion of African American towns, wanted to lead a black town movement in Oklahoma, and
Wanted to
he was from came out
Oklahoma
of
Black.
Kansas.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
he's
and he
buried
wanted
there
the
in Topeka Cemetery.
the Oklahoma Black State movement, and
Mhm.
he goes from Kansas down to Oklahoma, and then eventually returns back, and he's buried in Topeka Cemetery. So, yeah, there's so many connections you can make if you know where to look for them, and that's why we're here to help you.
And maybe we'll do something other than cemeteries, though. I don't know. We're going to be into October next time, so we might as well do cemeteries every.
Hmm.
We don't feature dead people on every episode. That's just how we roll. That like
That's right.
when I did a book on Topeka Cemetery years ago, I gave a copy to some friends of mine, and my friend Rita, that I visited with when I was back home, said, "Oh, Randy will love this. He loves dead people. It doesn't matter if he's kin to them or not." And I'm like, so we
I
got some
know.
dead ones for you, and we got some real live ones for you. So just stay with us. We got it all.
But isn't that the truth? I don't think there's anybody I know that spent more time in cemeteries
No.
looking for history and connections than the two of us. And in many cases, we've done those cemetery trips together. So,
Maybe Andy Waskey in Philadelphia. Maybe Andy.
mhm.
Yeah, close second. Well, folks, that will do it for us today. And we've loved being with you. Appreciate your sharing your time with us. I'm Deb Goodrich.
And I'm Michelle Martin
And we will see you somewhere around
around
Kansas.
Kansas.
Bye bye.